Keep your eyes on the woman standing beside the stalled vehicle on the shoulder of East Crest Parkway. This is 27-year-old Naomi Ellison, caught on a traffic camera just after 1 in the afternoon. Her car sits at an angle with the hazard lights blinking, the hood raised as she leans forward, checking the engine and tapping her phone, likely trying to make a call. Nothing about her body language suggests panic. She looks like someone dealing with a simple roadside issue. Now focus on the pickup truck easing into the frame behind her. It slows, pulls onto the shoulder, and sits for a moment before the driver steps out. He stands still, watching Naomi before walking toward her. She notices him only when he's a few feet away. They talk briefly, no tension, no visible concern. She gestures toward her car, he gestures toward his truck. Moments later, Naomi closes the hood, locks her vehicle, and walks with him to the passenger side of his truck. She climbs in, and the truck pulls away, merging into traffic until it disappears from view. That is the final recorded moment of Naomi Ellison alive. Welcome to Chills Beneath. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories. Before the moment her car stalled on East Crest Parkway, Naomi lived a steady and disciplined life. She worked as a commercial model, known for her professionalism and reliability rather than fame. She handled catalog shoots, small runway shows, and local campaigns, earning a reputation for always being prepared and easy to work with. She lived alone in a quiet apartment at Willow Terrace, following simple routines that kept her grounded. Morning calls to her mother, regular visits with her sister Mia, and constant communication with her agency. That morning, she completed a lifestyle shoot on Westland Drive and texted Mia to confirm their dinner plans to celebrate Mia's promotion. Naomi expected to be home within half an hour, change clothes, and head out for the evening. Friends described her as calm, organized, and cautious. She avoided unnecessary risks and kept a close circle, making her sudden disappearance even more alarming. Her car had never given her trouble, and mechanics later confirmed the stall was caused by a sudden fuel pump failure. Naomi had no reason to expect she'd be stranded that day or that accepting help would put her in danger. She lived by routine and predictability, but that couldn't protect her from the stranger who pulled over when her car failed. Curtis Malloy, a 44-year-old delivery driver from North Briarwood Heights, was the man who crossed paths with Naomi that day. He drifted from job to job, had no close relationships, and was known by former neighbors as withdrawn and unpredictable. Hours before approaching Naomi, he was recorded on a convenience store camera, lingering outside while quietly watching people come and go. Investigators later confirmed he had no deliveries scheduled that afternoon and no legitimate reason to be on East Crest Parkway. Curtis had minor run-ins with law enforcement in the past, including reports of roadside solicitation and small thefts, but nothing that led to serious charges. There was no connection between him and Naomi. They lived in different parts of the city, shared no acquaintances, and had never interacted before. But the footage from earlier that day showed a pattern. Curtis was out driving with no clear purpose, lingering where people traveled alone. When he saw Naomi stranded on the roadside, he seized the opportunity, setting the rest of the day's events in motion. Before Naomi encountered Curtis, her day unfolded exactly as she planned. She left the studio around 12:30 and walked to her car, replying to 3 messages, one from her mother, one from Mia, and one from her agent. She confirmed she'd be home within the hour and told Mia she'd meet her for dinner later. Her phone's navigation app showed a straight route home. Traffic was moderate and weather conditions were clear. Camera footage along Westland Drive and East Crest Parkway captured her vehicle traveling normally. She wasn't driving erratically, wasn't swerving, and didn't appear distracted. She drove at the posted speed, staying in the right lane most of the way. She passed through one major intersection, then another. Everything about her movements suggested she was focused on getting home. At 1:06 p.m., Naomi's car slowed abruptly near the Ridge Bend intersection. The traffic camera caught her hazard lights coming on within seconds. Her car drifted to the shoulder smoothly, not like someone panicking or fighting for control. She stopped safely, far enough from the road to avoid other vehicles. She stepped out, checked her phone, then opened the hood. She stayed at the front of the car, leaning inside the engine compartment as if searching for something obvious. A loose battery connection, an out-of-place hose, anything. Several cars drove by. No one slowed. She didn't look distressed enough to draw attention, and she didn't wave for help. She attempted a phone call which didn't connect. She tried again. Investigators would later learn her carrier had a known weak spot in that corridor, leading to dropped calls and temporary signal loss. Naomi likely didn't know that. Her only concern at that moment was getting home in time to keep her schedule on track. She didn't expect danger. She didn't expect anyone to pull over. She didn't expect her day to turn into anything other than a minor inconvenience. For those final normal minutes, her world was still predictable. The traffic camera captures the exact moment when Naomi's stalled car shifts from being a simple roadside issue to the beginning of a criminal investigation. Curtis's truck enters the frame, traveling in the same lane Naomi had been driving only minutes earlier. The truck slows before reaching her vehicle, then pulls onto the shoulder behind her. Curtis waits inside his truck for a moment. Maybe he was watching her. Maybe he was deciding what to say. The video doesn't reveal his intention, only his stillness behind the wheel. Then he steps out. He walks toward Naomi calmly, not rushing or shouting to get her attention. Naomi notices him only when he's close. She turns, holds her phone at her side, and says something to him. The camera is too far to capture expressions clearly, but nothing about her posture looks tense. She doesn't step back. She doesn't look wary. Curtis points toward the road, then toward his truck. The gesture appears like someone explaining an idea. Naomi looks down the road, maybe thinking about how far she'd need to walk or how long it might take for someone to arrive. She looks at her car, then at him. For a few seconds, they stand in place. Naomi nods once. She reaches up and pulls the hood down, securing it. She taps the lock button on her key fob, one small beep confirming her car is secure. She follows Curtis. She walks at a natural pace, not hurried, not dragged. She opens the passenger door of his truck and climbs into the seat. The truck pulls away, merging back into traffic, and disappears from the camera's field of view. No one else on the road slows down or watches closely. No one knows that the woman they just passed will not be returning to her vehicle ever again. Once Naomi entered Curtis's truck, everything about her situation changed. She was no longer in a public setting. She no longer had control over where she was going. Her phone, which had lost service minutes earlier, never reconnected to a tower again. Investigators later tracked the truck through license plate readers positioned throughout Briarwood Heights. After leaving the shoulder, Curtis exited the main highway within 2 minutes. Instead of heading toward nearby service stations or residential areas, he turned down a service road used mainly for deliveries to industrial warehouses. The road was long, narrow, and rarely traveled by anyone who didn't work in that part of town. There were no cameras on that stretch, no pedestrians, no passing cars. What Naomi believed was a short ride to safety became the moment she was taken out of public view. The moment she entered danger. Her family would later wonder why she agreed to get into the truck. Investigators concluded that everything about Curtis's approach appeared non-threatening. Naomi wasn't the type to take reckless risks. She probably thought she was just accepting a ride to call for help. She had no reason to believe the breakdown was anything more than bad luck, and no reason to expect that the man who stopped would be dangerous. Inside the truck, Naomi's world narrowed. She likely realized too late that Curtis had no intention of helping her. There were no witness accounts, no surveillance angles capturing what happened next. Investigators pieced together her final moments from what they found later inside the truck and from what Curtis eventually admitted. She entered the truck willingly, but once the doors closed, she had no opportunity to leave. What happened inside Curtis's truck was never seen on camera. There were no witnesses, no audio, no bystanders. But forensic evidence later revealed what took place after he drove into the isolated area off the main road. Inside the truck, Naomi was sexually assaulted. The assault was sudden and violent, leaving her unable to escape or call for help. After the assault, Curtis attacked her in a way that caused her immediate death. The autopsy later confirmed she died from blunt force trauma sustained inside the vehicle. There were no defensive wounds consistent with a prolonged struggle. Investigators concluded the attack happened quickly, in a confined space where she had little room to move. Curtis kept control the entire time. He had the advantage of privacy, isolation, and physical dominance. Naomi had no chance to flee once she realized the danger. The forensic team recovered biological evidence from the interior of the truck that confirmed the assault and linked Naomi to the crime scene. Hair fibers, trace materials, and DNA profiles left no doubt about what happened. Curtis could not claim she left the truck unharmed. Every piece of evidence contradicted any attempt to deny responsibility. Investigators later used the pattern of blood transfer inside the vehicle to determine she died shortly after the attack. Her life ended within minutes of the assault, long before Curtis drove away from the remote location where the crime took place. Her body was not in the truck by the time police seized it later, but every physical clue pointed to that interior as the primary crime scene. Curtis acted alone. He acted decisively, and he acted in a way that ensured Naomi never had the chance to escape or alert anyone to what was happening. After Naomi died inside the truck, Curtis drove back toward Briarwood Heights. His truck was picked up by several cameras near the industrial district. The footage showed him traveling north, away from the remote location and back into populated areas. At 2:03 p.m., a self-storage facility camera captured his truck pulling through the gated entrance. He stopped at one of the units registered in his name. He remained inside for 12 minutes before leaving again. What he did inside the unit was never fully determined. Investigators believed he used the space to clean himself and discard items connected to the assault. By the time police searched the unit days later, it had been wiped down. But small traces of biological residue were found behind a storage bin, matching Naomi's DNA profile. After leaving the facility, Curtis was seen behind a warehouse less than a mile away. A dumpster behind the building showed him disposing of several objects, though none were recovered. The trash had been emptied before investigators traced the footage, eliminating potential evidence. Curtis drove home in the late afternoon, parking his truck in his driveway. Several neighbors saw his vehicle there as usual. No one reported unusual behavior. No one suspected anything. Meanwhile, Naomi's car remained on the shoulder, still locked, still untouched. As day shifted to evening, more drivers passed it. Some assumed it had broken down and would be gone by morning. Others didn't notice it at all. By nightfall, Naomi's phone still hadn't connected to any network. Her family hadn't heard from her. Her sister waited for her at the cafe, checking her messages every few minutes, unaware that Naomi would never arrive. Her car sat in the same place silent, holding the first clue to her disappearance. When Naomi didn't come home that afternoon, no one panicked at first. Her workdays often shifted, and shoots sometimes ran late. But by evening, her silence felt unusual. Mia waited at the cafe, called twice, and went straight to voicemail both times. Naomi never ignored messages. Mia drove to her apartment, hoping to catch her arriving. Her car wasn't there, and the unit was dark. She called their mother, and the two tried to reassure each other, but Naomi always checked in. By 8:30, Mia's calls still weren't going through. By 9, worry turned into fear. A friend from Naomi's agency confirmed she'd left the studio hours earlier and had no other commitments. By 10, her family filed a missing person report. Police took it seriously because Naomi was consistent and responsible. A patrol car checked her apartment and found no signs she had returned home. Officers expanded the search along her usual driving route. Shortly after midnight, they found her car on the shoulder of East Crest Parkway, exactly where the camera recorded it earlier. The hazard lights were off, the doors were unlocked despite her locking them, and her phone and bag were missing. There were no signs of a struggle. With the discovery of her abandoned car, Naomi was no longer just late. She was officially missing under suspicious circumstances, triggering a full-scale search. When detectives arrived, they documented the car exactly as it sat on the shoulder. There was no damage, no flat tires, and nothing to suggest a forced stop. The hood was latched, and the only item inside that stood out was Naomi's jacket folded neatly on the back seat. The location immediately raised questions. East Crest Parkway stayed busy through the day, yet no one reported seeing a woman walking alone, and Naomi was not someone who would leave her car without calling for help. Detectives searched the area but found no dropped items, no struggle, and no tire marks from another vehicle. It looked as if she had stepped away for a moment and never returned. At 2 in the morning, they reviewed the nearest traffic camera. The footage showed Naomi pulling over, closing her hood, locking her car, and getting into a man's truck. That discovery changed everything. She hadn't walked away. She left with someone, and he was now the last person to see her alive. Detectives pulled more footage from nearby intersections and businesses, noting the truck's direction, color, and unique details. The investigation finally had a starting point. Meanwhile, Naomi's family waited through the night after learning her car had been found without her. Her mother broke down, and Mia sat awake hoping for updates that never came. The car stayed on the shoulder until morning, now treated as evidence. No longer part of a welfare check, but the first sign she'd been taken. Detectives spent hours reconstructing Naomi's route and the pickup truck's movements. They matched the footage from the Ridgebend intersection with cameras along East Crest Parkway, noting that the truck pulled into traffic less than a minute after Naomi climbed inside. License plate readers helped piece together the next steps. At 1:16 p.m., the truck was recorded heading north. A few minutes later, another reader caught it turning into the industrial district, an area with only one nearby camera. That camera showed the truck passing toward a row of warehouses, but offered no clear view inside. Footage from a warehouse later that afternoon captured the same truck behind the building, confirming it had stayed in the industrial zone. The gap between its arrival and that later appearance pointed to a long, unmonitored window. Enough time for the crime to occur. With the video trail mapped and the truck's movements consistent, detectives now needed to identify who was driving it. The truck's unique features, its dark color, the slight dent in the rear panel, and the older body model allowed officers to narrow down potential matches. They ran a search through the state's vehicle registration system. Multiple trucks matched the general description, but only a few were registered to addresses in the North Industrial District where the truck appeared on camera. One name stood out, Curtis Malloy. His registration listed a home address less than 2 miles away from the last camera that captured the truck. Detectives obtained his driver's license photograph and compared it to the man in the traffic footage. The build and facial structure matched. Within hours, Curtis was marked as a person of interest. Detectives requested additional footage from businesses near his residence. Several cameras captured the same truck arriving in his driveway on the afternoon Naomi disappeared. Detectives now had a matching vehicle, a driver who fit the physical profile, a connection to the industrial zone, a timeline consistent with Naomi's disappearance, evidence of prior complaints involving his behavior. With probable cause established, detectives prepared to make contact. Detectives arrived at Curtis's residence mid-morning. His truck sat in the driveway. The sight of the vehicle confirmed what they had already suspected, that Curtis had never left town and was not hiding from law enforcement. Officers knocked on the door. Curtis answered, appearing confused but calm. He claimed he didn't know why they were there. Detectives told him they had questions about his movements the previous afternoon. He gave inconsistent explanations, first claiming he stayed home all day, then saying he ran errands, then claiming he didn't remember details. When detectives told him they had video of his truck on East Crest Parkway, his face changed. He paused for several seconds before offering a new version of events, that he saw a woman stranded on the road and offered her a ride to the nearest gas station, dropping her off afterward. Detectives asked which gas station. He hesitated again. He didn't know the name. He couldn't remember the street. His answers came slower and less confidently. They requested permission to search his truck. Curtis declined. Minutes later, detectives presented a signed warrant. Inside the truck, investigators found biological evidence that confirmed Naomi had been inside. They also found fibers consistent with items recovered from the roadside where her car stalled. With enough evidence to support charges, officers placed Curtis under arrest. As he was led to the police car, neighbors gathered outside, watching in confusion. Curtis didn't struggle. He didn't shout. He simply lowered his head and avoided eye contact. Back at the station, investigators began preparing the case while another team returned to the industrial corridor to search for Naomi's remains. Naomi's body was discovered 2 days later in a wooded area behind an abandoned warehouse. A search team found her partially concealed beneath debris, consistent with an attempt to hide her remains. She was identified quickly through personal markers and forensic confirmation. Her autopsy revealed the full scope of what happened. She had been sexually assaulted. She suffered blunt force trauma consistent with being struck inside a confined space, likely the truck. Her injuries indicated she died within minutes of the attack. There were no defensive wounds suggesting a prolonged struggle. Toxicology tests showed no substances in her system. She had not been incapacitated chemically. Everything that happened to her occurred through physical force alone. The autopsy timeline perfectly matched the investigative timeline. Naomi died shortly after entering the industrial zone. Curtis did not take her anywhere afterward, except to move her body and dispose of evidence. The forensic team also matched Curtis's DNA to the samples recovered. There was no ambiguity, no doubt, no plausible explanation that would exonerate him. This evidence became the foundation of the prosecution's case. During questioning, Curtis attempted several shifting stories. First, he claimed he dropped Naomi at a gas station. When detectives confronted him with location data, disproving that, he said she asked to be let out near the industrial district. When they showed him footage of his truck entering isolated areas with no sign of her exiting, he changed the story again. Eventually, after hours of questioning, Curtis admitted that he offered Naomi a ride under the pretense of helping her after her car stalled. When asked why he did it, he said he felt like she wouldn't turn him down. He later admitted he assaulted her and panicked afterward. Detectives documented every word, though most of his statements conflicted with physical evidence. He never expressed remorse. He never asked about Naomi. He never claimed the assault or death was accidental. Curtis admitted to placing her body near the wooded area and disposing of evidence after returning to Briarwood Heights. His motive was clear: a predatory attack followed by homicide to avoid identification. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Prosecutors presented the video timeline, forensic results, GPS data, and Curtis's own statements. They showed footage of Naomi entering Curtis's truck, then mapped every location he drove to afterward. They demonstrated that her phone ceased transmitting once she entered the vehicle, and that Curtis made no attempt to contact authorities or seek help. The defense attempted to argue that the assault was not premeditated, but the jury rejected this claim based on Curtis's movements and disposal actions. The verdict was unanimous. Curtis Malloy was convicted of kidnapping, sexual assault, and first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Naomi's family attended every day of the trial, learning each new detail with heavy hearts. They remained composed, hoping for the closure that eventually came through the sentence. The verdict didn't bring Naomi back, but it ensured her killer would never harm another person again. Naomi Ellison was a hard-working model who kept her days tightly structured, moving between shoots, fittings, and home with predictable routines. On the afternoon she died, her car stalled along a busy roadway in full daylight. When a man stopped and offered help, she accepted a short ride instead of waiting alone on the shoulder. She locked her vehicle and entered his truck, believing she would be taken somewhere safe. That decision brought her into an isolated area with a stranger who used the appearance of assistance to assault and kill her. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, and share, and stay tuned for more stories.